With the new Legacy of Kain on the rise and Crystal Dynamics actually showing interest in this thing because they now officially own the IP and can do something with it rather than being under the grasp of Square Enix, let's actually construct a new Legacy of Kain. Now, this is going to be my personal opinion of how I would want it to play, what I would like to see, and what I would maybe want the story to be, as well as possibly switching a couple of other genres. But first, we have to do a couple of shout outs from the community itself. And if you guys want to skip all this, timestamp is down below. But let's talk about the community for 1 second, as well as some other things, and then we can get right into it. Here we go. The first thing I'd like to actually mention would be Blood Omen Resurgence. It's a remake being made by one guy, I think. He's doing all the art, all the animation, all of everything. He's ported it over to Unreal Engine 5, and it looks all right for a fan remake. I mean, it is just one guy, so props to you, man, for actually keeping up with it for this long. He's been working on it for about a year, I think. He's posted stuff on his YouTube channel and everything. I'll put a link for all that stuff down below, but check out Blood Omen Resurgence. It looks pretty good for a fan remake. And of course, if you are in the indie game scene and you want to jump on and maybe help him out with his project, go for it. The other thing is going to be the Blood Omen 2 concept edition, or pre-release version or whatever. It's for Blood Omen 2. It's being helped and supported by the Ancients Den, a long-time Legacy of Kain community and fan blog for the series. Blood Omen 2 Concept Edition or whatever. I put a link for that also down below. The trailer looks really interesting. Its aim is to take all the cut dialogue and everything from Blood Omen 2 that are still in the files, and as well as the concept art and just the early versions of what Blood Omen 2 was possibly going to be, and mod it into Blood Omen 2. Again, I'm excited for this. Blood Omen 2 is one of my favorite games in the series. I know, hate me for it. But yeah, it looks really interesting. A link for that down below as well.
Eat your clothes for the night. Move along. Put that weapon away.
And finally, it wouldn't be Legacy of Kain without me mentioning Dead House Sonata. For those of you who don't know about my channel or Dead House Sonata, it's something I talk regularly about on here. It's something being worked on by Dennis Dyack, the creator of Legacy of Kain. Now, I know there is some device between the fans of who really created the Legacy of Kain. It was worked on, built, created, written, directed by Dennis Dyack for Blood Omen 1 before Activision, Eidos, Crystal Dynamics, and some other things happened behind the scenes with lawyers and everything that took the power away from Dennis as well as the creative aspects of that series. It then got ported over and handed over rather to Amy Hennig, who is considered like the mother of the series. She worked on Soul Reaver 2, and Defiance. Blood Omen 2 was a different team. But yeah, I want to talk about Dead House Sonata. Now, hold your breath for this one, guys, a little bit, and don't skip or immediately turn to negative thoughts when I tell you what it is if you don't know about it already. Dead House Sonata is a spiritual successor to Blood Omen Legacy of Kain, being worked on by Dennis Dyack and Apocalypse Studios. It is an online, free-to-play, action-adventure RPG with multiplayer aspects, 6-player co-op so far, and you don't have to play it that way. You can play it single player. And the reason I say, like, don't hate it immediately is because it actually looks really promising, and the fact that I've been able to play a little bit of it is all right. I'm gonna have gameplay and stuff up here rolling, but check out Dead House Sonata, guys. It's being worked on by Dennis Dyack. It's a spiritual sequel to Blood Omen Legacy of Kain. It's got vampires, ghouls, demons, wraiths. The lore and the story behind it is already really good. There's already great artwork and everything for it as well. It looks to be very promising. It's something I personally believe in for this project. I do like Dennis Dyack in his video games. Maybe that has something to do with it. I do think he's a really great writer. That also might have something to do with it. And without Blood Omen 1, we wouldn't have the Legacy of Kain in the first place. So even if you want to check this thing out on the side and wait for it, and maybe reserve judgment until it's out. But yeah, definitely check out Dead House Sonata. Check out the videos and stuff I have on Dead House Sonata as well. But that's just something I want to bring to everyone's attention within this Legacy of Kain community. I know it's not Legacy of Kain. I know the online free-to-play thing already might turn some of you guys off, just think of it as like Gothic or emo Warframe if you really want to. That's the formula they're going with. They're going to try to model it after Warframe a little bit. I talk about it, of course, on a podcast at House Whispers. You guys can also check out here on YouTube or on Spotify. Links for all that stuff down below. But definitely look into Dead House Sonata if it's of an interest to you, and if something Legacy of Kain like is of interest to you. Not just because it's being worked on by Dennis Dyack, but because it seems to be one of the closest things to Legacy of Kain, apart from games that spiritually resemble it, of course. Yeah, Dead House Sonata, guys, definitely check it out. That's all for the stuff I wanted to just mention really quickly before we actually get into this construction video. And yeah, that's it. Blood Omen Resurgence. It's a remake being done by a fan. Definitely check out the Blood Omen 2 Concept Edition or whatever they're calling it. And of course, Dead House Sonata. I highly recommend checking out all that stuff. Everything will be linked down below. But yeah, check it out.
Brigand's Vambrace. One arm in metal, one in leather. One for a shield, one for a blade. Sunshard.
Why did I even pick it up? Why am I still holding it? Oh, what's wrong with me?
Narratively, well, to talk about the first thing I definitely think we need as a community for Legacy of Kain is a remaster. We need fixed up versions of the PC ports. The PC ports are notoriously bad. Defiance runs well. Blood Omen 2 runs all right with a bunch of crashes, depending on what CPU you use. Soul Reaver 2 runs okay. Like, Soul Reaver 1, though, is a bad PC port. Blood Omen 1 is finally on GOG, and it's a solid version. You can use a wrapper to make it a little better. But I definitely think we need proper remasters of Legacy of Kain first. Give them over to Night Dive Studios. Night Dive have expressed interest in remastering Legacy of Kain on a poll that they were like, hey, here's all these games that we want to be able to try to remaster and get the rights to so we can fix it up. I definitely think Night Dive would do this series justice, especially with their Kex engine, adding a bunch of like modern lighting and maybe updated textures, stuff like that. For the remasters of Legacy of Kain. I definitely think we need that first before they talk about a sequel, because if you remaster Legacy of Kain and you give it to a new audience, especially for modern consoles, even though they're old games, you can set that up for the sequel that they would potentially develop in the future or will develop in the future. That's the only way I can see a possible sequel for Legacy of Kain Defiance, maybe a rebooted Legacy of Kain Dark Prophecy. It was going to be the final game in the series before it was canceled, and Amy Hennig left to go work at Naughty Dog to work on Jak and Daxter and Uncharted. So I think we need a remaster first. Fix those games up, and then we can have our sequel talk. Personally, some of you put the Dark Souls games, it would just fit Legacy of Kain with that dark and Lovecraftian atmosphere. I am interested in Bloodborne to play whenever that hits PC, of course, but I've never played the Dark Souls games personally. They don't look like an interest to me, so I have no idea. I don't doubt you guys for saying it would be a good fit for Legacy of Kain, but what I would personally like to see is something God of War-like. And not just God of War like the new God of War series. Defiance, Legacy of Kain Defiance, went with a Devil May Cry God of War action style combat with the camera angles and with the way the combat flows and works. For Legacy of Kain Defiance, I think that would translate perfectly. Just change the camera to a third-person camera instead of the isometric fixed camera angles that God of War and Devil May Cry were known for back in the day. And I guess Devil May Cry 5 too. Regardless, I'd want to see a more God of War style combat system. I wouldn't want the RPG elements though for that game. The only reason I say that is because Kain, if we're playing as Kain in this new one anyway, and it's not a reboot and it's like a direct sequel or something, we'll talk about that in a second, is that I don't think there should be RPG elements. I don't think if you're playing as a fully fledged adult, like fully powered God Emperor Kain, that you need RPG elements to power yourself up and to get stronger armor, because his skin is already armor, and all these other things for like weapons. Especially if he's using the Soul Reaver, the most powerful weapon on the planet, they might have to find a way to nerf it, of course. Upgrades for that would just seem pointless. I think that's where the Devil May Cry style combat would come in, but just with the third person camera, or God of War 2018 combat would come into play. The issue is like that you're playing as a strong vampire with superpowers, and you're like a god, right? So you would have to have the enemies be difficult for you to fight. One thing I didn't like about Legacy of Kain Defiance was that all the enemies were incredibly spongy. I understand that it was to pace the combat in a certain way and to have the fights go a certain length to really, use that Devil May Cry style combat, but with a limited moveset for Defiance, it got really stale really quickly, as well as having the characters of Kain and Raziel play nearly identically, just the animations were different, and the bullet spongy enemies, or the sword spongy enemies rather, were just too much. After a while, it just became too repetitive and too tiring for Defiance. So I think you need less encounters, or a good even pace number of combat encounters, and you need to have the combat be very chunky and brutal and violent, and have enemies go down sort of easily until you get to like the vampire hunter enemies or something like that. This is where I think Dead House Sonata, to talk about it a little bit, also would sort of come in handy. The way the combat works for Dead House Sonata is very fun. You kind of kill enemies there. They have a way of balancing that out, but that's not a Dead House. This isn't a Dead House Sonata video. I definitely think it can learn some lessons from Dead House Sonata, perhaps, maybe even borrow some things, or just rip off the God of War combat. That's what I'd want. I'd want that God of War 2018 combat. It's brutal, it's visceral, it feels really good, and even when you're upgraded and you're like a super powered god, you're playing on a really hard difficulty in God of War 2018 to still be viable with all the upgrades and have everything amazing and the enemy scale and stuff. I don't think Legacy of Kain should do that. I think after those remasters, I wouldn't actually mind if Dead Sun, the canceled 2012-2013 project that was meant to reboot the Legacy of Kain series, comes back. I think Dead Sun looked promising visually. It had the change of switching to the spectral material realms a la Soul Reaver in ultimate, like, immediate modern day times. The problem with Dead Sun is that it was a next gen game being developed for last gen consoles. It was supposed to come out on like PS3, Xbox 360, I believe, but it really should have come out on PS4 and the Xbox One, or whatever, the Xbox S, whatever the next console was for that. It definitely needed a PS4 release or something instead of the PS3, Xbox 360 that they were developing it for. I think narratively, I know a lot of people hated it, but you can easily change that story to a what if scenario. In Legacy of Kain, Kain time travels through this thing called the chronoplast, and he can see into other futures by glaring through a window or something like that shows all these possible outcomes of how it would work. In Dead Sun, the story was that Kain and Raziel are dead, and it takes place millions of years in the future after that fact. You can easily have this sort of tie into Soul Reaver 2 as well as Defiance and the other games by having it be a what-if moment, by Kain staring into the chronoplast at the ending, perhaps, of the Dead Sun and saying, oh, well, this is what would have happened if I died in Soul Reaver 2 or something else. Right? You can easily change the narrative up very slightly by just calling it a what if moment. That way it's not canon per se, but it could be if that were a potential path taken. This game does have time travel. It does get a bit confusing, but there's a million different things you can handle with time travel, especially story-wise in this series. That's the only way I can see Dead Sun narratively working out. I know it would piss a lot of people off if, well, this game and Kain and Raziel are dead and it looked really shitty and blah, 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 blah. The other thing I know some people didn't like is that it looked like a Batman Arkham series knockoff, which is okay. Legacy of Kain, in my previous video, never had a gaming identity. It always borrowed heavily from other series or straight up ripped them off and just followed that mechanic for what was popular at the time. For Blood Omen 1 and Soul Reaver 1, it was Legend of Zelda. For Soul Reaver 2, it was more of a linear Zelda style experience, very much dungeon crawly heavy, linear back and forth backtracking thing. Blood Omen 2, it was an action adventure hack and slash combat game, chapter by chapter. Defiance, it was Devil May Cry, God of War style combat with still a dungeon crawling kind of thing. It was very, very bland after a while, but I do like Defiance. So I think it would be fine if Dead Sun came back, potentially, maybe, and it ripped off of Batman the Arkham series. A million other games, Shadow of War, Shadow of Mordor, Mad Max, which is actually really solid of a game. The Batman games, Spider-Man that just hit PC recently, was on consoles. So many games have ripped off the Batman Arkham formula. It wouldn't be a bad thing if Legacy of Kain Dead Sun also ripped off the Batman Arkham formula, especially with the gameplay looking very solid. The combat looked good. The little upgrade system thing they had looked fine. Everything looked solid. It's just that I know a lot of people didn't like the story that Kain and Raziel died, that it was set millions of years in the future. How are they going to fix all this? Well, how is this going to tie into the main series? I know that bummed a lot of people out, as well as the dialogue. Legacy of Kain is very flowery, very poetry, very Shakespearean. Thank you, Dennis Dyack, for that. And Amy Hennig did a good job at emulating all that for the series. But Dead Sun had like fuck yous and this bitch and that, and it wasn't very poetic and flowery. And that makes sense kind of in a narrative way, in that you're set a million years in the future and people are just getting dumber as time goes on, and the world is getting more corrupted and dead as time goes on. I wouldn't also mind if Nosgoth came back in some way, shape, or form. I do think it's a solid thing, but I am an outlier in these things. So I think you could bring that back for a possible Legacy of Kain sequel or reboot. Just bring back Dead Sun. The work is already in there. Maybe they own the files from that. Maybe, I don't know how that works. You could bring that back also, but that's just another way that this series can potentially come back. Okay, so we've talked about Dead Sun, we've talked about remasters, we've talked about the combat for this new potential Legacy of Kain game. Narratively, like proper narratively, I think we need a reboot. Because if there's going to be a sequel, you can't do anything without remasters. And if you're going to reboot it and then give us remasters, then you might as well bring back Dead Sun anyway as kind of a reboot what if scenario that I discussed just a second ago. I think if we're actually going to make another Legacy of Kain game, or when that actually happens, it needs to be a reboot. In 2016, there was Omen, a canceled Legacy of Kain reboot project with Kain and Raziel, being led by Dennis Dyack. I can't remember what company he was working for at the time, but it was being led by fucking Dennis Dyack, who's now working on Dead Sun. But it got canceled maybe like a year or a couple months in development. There has been leaked artwork that I'm flashing up here now, and leaked, I want to say, renders or grayscale, gray box stuff for Omen. And it was just a Blood Omen style isometric reboot of the series where you got to play as a young Kain and Raziel again. Like, I think that would have been awesome. Maybe bring that back too. But definitely narratively, I think we need a reboot. So Omen would be nice to see actually resurrected somehow. Or you should seriously reboot it with Kain and do a remake of Blood Omen and Soul Reaver, and maybe tie all that in somehow back and forth. If there is a sequel, then I think there needs to be a recap somehow. I know on the survey it stated, would you want a recap if we were to do a sequel to Legacy of Kain Defiance, or just Legacy of Kain in general? It's been 20 years now. Would you want a recap of the series? The answer is yes. We definitely need a recap, and you can even frame it once again as the chronoplast, like you as the player in a first-person perspective or whatever is staring at the chronoplast mirror, and it's giving you a recap of everything in the series that happened from Blood Omen 1 to Soul Reaver, Soul Reaver 2, Blood Omen 2, Defiance, tied in like chronologically maybe, and of course make it like be a nice like updated CG cutscene, or maybe even in-game with whatever the rendering graphics they're going to use, be it Unreal 5. Like the technology is there, might as well remake some of the greatest bits with modern day graphics, right? So I definitely think we would need a recap if they were going to do a sequel, only to catch people up. But the issue here with having a sequel 20 years later with people who haven't played it, without remasters, without a reboot or something like that, is that there will be confusion. The story, the narrative for this new Legacy of Kain, if it is a direct sequel, will have to be so hand-holdy and like, I feel forced recap of, you remember that time that this happened in that one game sequel that we did, guys? Like, there would have to be so much of that for this new game that it would kind of feel flat narratively, and it would definitely detract from the story that they're trying to tell. God of War did something, and this is going back to the God of War 2018. God of War 2018 did something so well in that it was a soft reboot of the series, which I think Legacy of Kain should do as well. You have it be a continuation somehow, but you have it be a soft reboot without any hand-holding. And this is where remasters again come in. If you do remasters of Legacy of Kain, then you can do that soft reboot style of game without having to hold someone's hand narratively of what happened before. If you soft reboot, then that gives you the freedom to do what God of War 2018 did basically, and tell its own narrative without having the past show in on itself. Sure, you have things from the previous game showing their heads and making references to the other games in the series before it, like God of War 2018 did. There was a bunch of references and Easter eggs to the old game series, as well as a bit of a narrative tie in there as well. Also, so you can do that with Legacy of Kain soft reboot also, but you would have to do it where you play as an Elder Kain trying to fix the bullshit that he did in Defiance, or in something, time traveling, something. This is where I don't like the whole time travel thing of Legacy of Kain, even though it's handled really well. It does get tiring after a while, but I think a soft reboot for Legacy of Kain would be nice, and that's just from the narrative perspective. Story-wise, I have no fucking idea what they're going to do. Half the voice cast has passed away because they are ancient themselves. Sadly, Renee Auberjonois, who played Janos Audrin from Soul Reaver 2 to Defiance, passed away in 2019, which really sucks, because Paul Lukather, who played Vorador, passed away. Tony J, who played the Elder God, passed away in 2003, shortly after the making of Legacy of Kain Defiance, I believe. Not to mention Michael Bell, the voice of Raziel, is in his 80s, approaching the 90s, I think. And Simon Templeman, the voice of Kain, is in his 60s, I believe now also. Maybe even his 70s now, I have no idea. But they're getting up there. So I definitely think replacing those voice actors is difficult to do, which is why I think a soft reboot would also work well, where you could only have Michael Bell and Simon Templeman return now. I think they really need to do this now before they pass away again, or pass away, because that would really fucking suck. That's the only way you could do it. I don't think tying in or finding replacements for those voice actors would work, simply because the fans wouldn't accept it. I know they wouldn't accept it. I know you guys wouldn't accept it. I wouldn't mind if they found solid voice actors. They did do a reboot of Reboot a couple of years ago. Terrible, but the voice actor they got to replace Tony J as Megabyte is really solid. I think getting him in it would be a good thing. I'm going to play a clip for you right now.
Now that I command Hexadecimal's power, none can stand against me.
You did that? To your own sister?
Yes. It's rather good, isn't it?
Take one final look, dear sister.
I will miss this mainframe. So many memories.
Yes, but beyond mainframe lies a vast cyberverse for us to corrupt.
I think having him to replace Tony J would be fine. He did a really good job At first, I didn't notice it until I actually had to remind myself that it wasn't Tony J, but he does a really, really good job. Solid. But I think they're just so iconic, and you can't really replace them. So I don't know how they would handle that narratively if you just don't have them in the game at all. You find some way that Kain somehow destroyed the Elder God, or he's just silent and hiding in the background and working in the background to where he doesn't even have to make an appearance. And Vorador is dead technically in the series and has died a bunch of times. So it's, irrelevant that Paul Lukather could come back or a replacement could come back. Janos is also sort of passed away or dead or trapped in the demon realm or whatever it is for the story. So there's no point in him coming back either, sadly. Not that he can. They're all passed away. So I definitely think you just need Michael Bell and Simon Templeman to come back narratively. And this is where the soft reboot thing comes in, to where you can just have the story continue or be its own kind of singled out narrative while referencing the series beforehand. That's the only way I can see this thing working narratively as a soft reboot. As a direct sequel, I don't think it has a chance whatsoever. Again, without a lot of hand holding from the previous series, that just wouldn't work, and it'd make the narrative kind of clumsy, which is why we need remasters or something to happen. Finally, I think an RTS style game would work. And this way, you don't even have to have it be about Kain and Raziel. You can have it be a freaking Nosgoth town simulator or whatever, like a building simulator. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, that wouldn't actually be a pretty bad idea. That might actually sound fun. You get to be a town and a kingdom constructor for Nosgoth or something. That'd be neat. But an RTS, I think, would work well for Legacy of Kain also, in that you could play as the ancient vampires and the ancient Hilden from the Soul Reaver story lore. That would just, involve factions on factions fighting each other in an RTS game. StarCraft, Warcraft, early stuff like that would be awesome. I think RTS would work really well. I know a lot of people don't like multiplayer games, or at least multiplayer for Legacy of Kain, but I would like to see Nosgoth come back. I think a multiplayer style game like Nosgoth worked really well. It was very solid, despite some of you hating on it or never playing it and just hating it. Like, if you've played it, it was solid. The problem with Nosgoth was that it was mismanaged terribly. Square Enix didn't put any money into it and love. Psyonix were making money with Rocket League, so they kind of gave up on it halfway through. As well as whatever engine they were using for it, or maybe it was Unreal 3, I don't know. Whatever engine they were using for it or something was just bugged out, and they could never really get around to squashing all these bugs that just plagued the game. It was terrible, really terrible. So I think Nosgoth could make a triumphant return if you had a solid team that wanted to work on it with love, that believed in that product, in that game, in Nosgoth. I think Nosgoth was great. I definitely think more of you should have played it for it to come back or something, but it was just mismanaged poorly. That's the only reason it failed, guys, is because it was mismanaged. But I wouldn't mind Nosgoth coming back, or just some sort of multiplayer element, because I know community is a thing. I know someone out there in my comments said MMO. I think that's a bad fucking idea, is an MMO for Legacy of Kain. MMOs live and die every 5 minutes. And there's no money in there except without extreme monetization, and I know a lot of people don't want that. I also would not want an open world game. I am sorry, no open world, no side quests, no none of that bullshit. Open world fatigue is so rampant now. There's so many fucking bloated, shitty open world games that narratively are fine, or mechanically they're fine. It's just that they're so bloated with fucking side content and bullshit that it just gets so tiring. Which brings us back to God of War 2018. I think the new Legacy of Kain needs a hub world of sorts, like God of War 2018, like Soul Reaver 1 even, the sort of hub world of Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, where you had like the Hyrule fields as your hub and you can go to each little area. That worked well for Soul Reaver with the Lake of the Dead and the the pillars. You can go back and forth between there as your little hub, and you can explore these different dungeons. That's what I think we need to do for this new Legacy of Kain, is rip off the God of War 2018 formula. That's really all I'm getting at here, because in God of War 2018 you had that hub of the lake, and you had each little area that you could explore. There were side quests, but narratively, Kratos actually explains away side quests in saying that, oh, we only do this to gain experience, even though it's not part of our main journey. I can't really see Kain doing that. And if he does, he would need to explain it away as, I'm doing this to gain more knowledge and experience for the road ahead of my time-traveling fucking journey or some shit. That's the only way I can see it happening. But I definitely don't want a full-blown open-world exploring Nosgoth thing. I don't want that. I definitely think you could have a time traveling Kain where you jump back and forth between different eras in the Chronoplast chamber. Maybe that's your hub world. You have the Chronoplast chamber as your hub, and then you time travel to different periods, and that gives you access to this area of the land, that area of the land, and in order to unlock it in another time period, you have to do something in that time period. That's the only way I can really see it being a sort of open world thing. Is that you kind of Metroidvania your way around the different time areas to do it. That's it. But like, I think full-blown open world side quests, random events, Red Dead 2, Witcher 3, nah, don't give me that. No, I don't want that. I think it would fail. I think it would fail in that it has that problem that all open world games have, in that the narrative isn't focused enough. In The Witcher 3, your goal is to find your daughter Ciri and to stop the Wild Hunt or whatever. That's a super important goal to Geralt. So then why am I running around collecting cards for a fictional in-game card game? Why am I doing all these side quests if that's not if my main goal is to find my daughter? Like, that should be my urgent thing, you know, for The Witcher 3. God of War, again, makes sense with the side quests and that it explains it away. But at the end of the day, even Kratos is like, bro, we still got to get to the fucking mountain, dude. And it follows a narrative, right? So that's what you need. I think the open world thing and Kain doing side quests wouldn't work at all, because it wouldn't follow whatever the main narrative is, especially if it's a sequel. If we get a sequel to Legacy of Kain, or when we get a sequel to Legacy of Kain and it's a soft reboot like God of War or something else, and they try to make it a direct kind of follow-up to the other games, the narrative of Kain trying to fix his problem that he created, and going on this journey to do that very important thing that he's been trying to do for the 5 games in the series or something, wouldn't make sense with an open world game. And I need to stop for a second and do a side quest or whatever, you know, unless it benefits him. Kain is selfish. If it benefits him in some way, he will do it. If it benefits him getting to his main goal, he will do it. He will find a way around it to make it work. That's it. You could argue that, well, because it has something to do with his main goal, that's the reason he's going to do this side quest. But I think side quests are so tedious and the reward is so minuscule, especially to Kain's eyes, that there's no point in doing side quests. So why would you have side quests in the first place? That's basically it. Like, so to sum up this whole reconstruction of a Legacy of Kain game is, make it God of War 2018, or rip off that stuff as much as possible. Again, because Legacy of Kain never really had an identity in the first place, and it was also borrowing from other series. Just rip off God of War 2018, combat and everything. You have to find a way to make it interesting. So, but see, that's the thing. That's where I'm stuck. That's where I would like you guys' feedback of, how would you make that interesting? Imagine a Legacy of Kain game, but don't have any RPG elements. I'm serious. If you're going to think about this, think about it without 0 RPG elements whatsoever. Because if it's an RPG, I can't imagine it would make sense for an older Kain to have, you know, unlockable, stronger armor, because your skin is armor and you are already a god emperor. Unless it's bouncing back and forth between a younger Kain and an older Kain, that's the only way I can see RPG elements working out. Like God of War 2018 with weapon enchantments and stuff like that, is if a younger Kain isn't relying on the Soul Reaver, the most powerful god sword in the game, if he is relying on different styles of armor, then I understand why an RPG system, like armor system and stuff, would work is if you're playing a younger Kain. I'm going to bring it back to Dead House Sonata, where you have different weapons and armors and upgrades and stuff that you can unlock within that series within that game when it comes out eventually. That's how it's going to work. Warframe, right? Warframe. That's the only way I can see it working, is if you are playing as a young Kain. But if it's a soft reboot, wouldn't you want to play as an older god Kain that's continuing this series, or would you want to play as a younger Kain? If it's a younger Kain, make it like God of War, I guess. Give it the RPG elements, but his powers have to evolve naturally. So that's the only place that I'm stuck at right now in my thinking. So what would you guys want to see? Do you guys think this is a good idea? Let me know. If you like this video, like this video. If you don't, dislike it, whatever. But would you guys want to see all this actually happen? What are your opinions on wanting a new Legacy of Kain? I know some of you have said that in Legacy of Kain Returns, but I want the comment section for this one to really be about fleshing out what you guys would want mechanically, narratively, everything from a new Legacy of Kain game. This is what I would want. What would you guys want? Again, I've never played Dark Souls. I don't have any interest in those games. I don't know if Legacy of Kain would suit that, especially with how the enemy encounters and stuff work. Maybe it could, because you could have all the enemies be vampire resistant enemies or something, and they resist the Soul Reaver. Like, the Soul Reaver is basically a lightsaber in this universe, so do you have enemies that can resist a fucking lightsaber, you know? That's the only way I can see like Dark Souls style combat working out, especially if it's really brutal, heavy, and hard. But again, I'm not really a fan of those games, so I don't know if I would actually play it if it were a Dark Souls style game. I don't know. But what would you guys really want to see? Tell me your narrative options of what you guys would think. Do you think my ideas are good ideas? What would your gameplay style want to be? I know some of you don't like Nosgoth. I know some of you don't like Dead Sun, but do you think if they were to reboot Dead Sun, if it were a what if scenario of Kain staring into the chronoplast or something, that would work narratively? That way at the ending of the game, especially if it's like a shitty ending or something, they can easily pull out and be like, oh, hey guys, it didn't actually happen. It's not canon. It's just a what if scenario. That's like how they can save the sort of Dead Sun narrative that they were going for. But I think if Dead Sun were to come back, they might reboot the narrative anyway, even though I think the gameplay and everything looked fine. I do think the gameplay for Dead Sun also looked really well. I wouldn't mind a Legacy of Kain game where you play as a rebooted Kain or whatever as Arkham Combat also. I think that'd be really fucking cool. Again, what would you guys like to see? Please keep it friendly though, and please keep it civilized in these comments. So yeah, what would you guys like to see? Let me know everything. Do you think my ideas are good ideas? Yeah, what would you change? What wouldn't you change? Let's talk about it. Legacy of Kain is returning. The survey is finished, by the way. I pinned it in my last video. The survey's done. Even tweet Crystal Dynamics. Let them know what you guys would like to see in a new Legacy of Kain. Talk on the Facebook posts. Make your own videos about this stuff. Like, let the world know what you would want in a new Legacy of Kain game. Like, get to it, guys. Come on. Start your fan projects of fan Legacy of Kain games of what you would like to see. Write that fan fiction, whatever. We're still a strong community. Let's go. Let's get to this, man. So that's it for this one. I've been Calypso. I'll see you guys in the next one. Talk to you soon.